Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. So those of you who are here for some of the earlier talks know that the first one was on my life from age 0 to 13. You can't hear? What's that?
It echoes.
It echoes. I can hear you really good. Yeah. I can't do much about the echo. I don't know anything about how that works. No, they're saying they can hear the sound. They're saying it's echoing. I don't think I can stop that. Yeah. Okay. They're saying we have hearing devices. You can hear through the sound system. Okay, well, I'm going to start anyway, while you guys, because I like to start on time. So those of you who've been previously know the first one was on the first 13 years of my life, childhood. The second talk, it didn't echo like this today when I was preaching in here, so I'm not sure what changed. I can hear the echo myself, and I used this very same microphone this morning, and it didn't do that. I hate being further away. Let me try the pulpit. Is it echoing from here? Yeah. It's better? Okay. I don't like being this far away, but we'll go with this microphone instead. Okay, so as I was saying, the second talk was about my years in the seminary. And what I've said before every talk is I have way more to say than there is time to say it. And also probably some of the more interesting things that I would have to say are not appropriate to say in church. And so we'll just stick with that. And also I realized as I was doing this, the 8 chapters of my life, that there's really nobody who knows me from all 8 chapters. It's just, if you think about your own life, it's probably true the same. Those of you that are parents and grandparents, well, your kids and grandkids probably don't know a lot that you did when you were younger either, or at other different stages of your life. It's pretty normal. And so and this is not a formal talk, just some stories. And so that's why I called it Musings and Lessons. Call something Musings, I can get away with saying about whatever I want to say. So the people who are here, who knew me during those years, you can be my fact checkers. So if you want to say something when we get done, you're welcome to do that, as long as the people want to hear from you. So we have that microphone right there for that purpose. So while it's not a formal talk, we'll start with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. So this talk you saw I titled Cottleville Baby Priest, The Laity Love Our Catholic Faith. So I ended the last talk about my seminary years by saying that the priest who gave the homily at my first Mass said that Ted burns the candle at both ends, and I'm not sure how long he can keep doing that. Well, 50 years later, I'd say the same is true, and candle isn't burnt out yet, so that's a good sign for me. What I remember about my first assignment along that line, I was very excited. Think about it. After being in the seminary 12 years, it was pretty exciting to go out. Unlike many people who finished school, I did not have to do a job search. My way I found to go to Cottleville was because I got a letter from the bishop telling me to go there. I had no idea where Cottleville was. Nowadays, when a man gets ordained, they generally, sometimes even tell him before the ordination where he's going, or the bishop will give him a letter that day. Back in those days, the letter got mailed to my parents' house. And so my brothers saw the letter before I did. And when I got home to go look for the letter, one of my brothers is, we're from the city. One of my brothers was standing on the front porch holding a fishing pole. And another one of my brothers was inside the house playing on the piano, Country Road. So they had, that was it. And when they saw the name, they all called it Cattleville. We had no idea where Cattleville was. Just like when I got assigned to St. Genevieve as a deacon, had no idea where it was. The instructions, when I called, no internet in those days, when I called for directions, they said when you get to what looks like a firehouse, make a left-hand turn and you'll see the church. So that's how I got there. It was true. But at the same time, the Archbishop hand wrote at the bottom of the letter, this is in addition to your duties of teaching at St. Dominic. Well, there was a little glitch in the system because the letter the pastor got saying that he was getting a new associate, which they had never had a young associate before, did not include the part about St. Dominic. Well, this priest had some pretty strong opinions about a lot of things. And so I learned he thought he was going to get somebody who was going to be full-time totally at the parish. He had not been told about the teaching part. And so I can't even imagine what he said to the Archbishop. But I learned to stay out of that, to just stay in my lane. Just do what I was asked to do and let him do what he needed to do. So it was my first lesson in obedience. We had no training to be teachers. So remember what I did that summer as I asked around the Archdiocese. I said, tell me some people who are great teachers and I'll go visit with them. Maybe I can get some learning on the spot. And then just going to a place called Cattleville it was my second act of obedience. The first was going to St. Genevieve, which also I had never been there. I still remember the first week I was there, the pastor left town. So I guess you could take that as a sign of trust or something like that. And so I remember the first Tuesday night I was there, they had PH devotions. I had never heard of PH devotions. We didn't have them. We weren't taught it in the seminary, and they never had them in the parish where I grew up. So I just told the people, I said, I have no idea what this is. They said, this is easy. They gave me a card. They said, you just say these prayers where it says priest, and it'll be good. So I did that. Then I remember shortly after, actually it was that same night, a couple came in to see me after the Mass in the rectory, and they wanted to talk. I have no idea how old they were. They could have been 100 to me. They were, I'm guessing now they were probably in their 60s. Both, it was a widow and a widower, and what they were asking me was, did I think their relationship was advancing too fast? Well, how was I supposed to know? I was 25 years old, and I was pretty well used to making up stuff, but I had no idea in this case. They explained to me their story, and I told them, from what they told me, it sounded like they were on the right path. So that was the words God put in my mouth, so that's what I told them. They didn't, and during those years that I was at Cattleville, three of my brothers got married. I was ordained in 75. One got married in 76, one in 77, and one in 78. So I thought that when my brothers got married, I think it gave them a chance to improve by having a wife. You know, you say the main role of husbands and wives is to help each other get to heaven, and it looked to me like that was working. Well, it was the same for me going to the parish. The parish was like my spouse, and probably like a lot of husbands, I got a lot of unsolicited advice. So that was, it gave me opportunities to grow as well. People showed me what it would mean to be a good priest by the way they live their own lives and asking me to do different things. So I do feel like I grew a lot in those first 4 years. Felt like I grew more in the first year as a priest than I did in all my 12 years in the seminary. And I think that's probably not too unusual for people in other aspects of their lives as well. So some of the people that I met there. One of them was the previous pastor before Father McGuire. His name was Bill Peasold. I think it says on his tombstone, he was a good and faithful servant. I stopped by his tombstone most of the time when I go to the parish for some event. He was considered a saint there. Those of you who are from that parish know these stories. The rest of you do not, or probably don't. Probably some of I am not sure these stories were true, but the most common stories that were told about him, one was when they were putting a new steeple on the church and they couldn't lift it up high enough, that Father went out and told all the crane operators and everybody, get off your equipment, kneel down on the ground, say a Hail Mary, and when they tried again, they got the steeple all the way up. Another story that was commonly told about him was when he would go visit people in St. Charles, he would oftentimes come back without his coat or without his shoes, that he would give them away when he was there. And another one was that I don't know how they did recordings in those days. That was before any of the more modern means of recording things, but I think he had recorded recordings. He was very big on the devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and he had recorded the Rosary and all the different decades of the Rosary to teach people how to say the Rosary. All I knew was Father McGuire wasn't going to get an associate until he moved Father Peasold out of the house. So I was thinking, these people must be thinking they got a pretty poor replacement for a saint. They got somebody who looked to them more like an altar boy. And so the people treated me nice, but I was pretty sensitive to the fact that I was replacing someone who had been there from, as pastor, a beloved pastor from 1938 to 1970, and then as an emeritus pastor for 5 more years. The pastor there, as I mentioned, was Father McGuire when I got there. I'd say he was a very zealous priest. I can still picture that was back in the days when we had, before things were online, there were individual registration cards for all the families. And whenever he would go up to St. Charles to visit somebody in the hospital, on his way back, he always took a stack of those cards with him and went door to door and visiting the parishioners. He prided himself on getting around the whole parish a couple times during the years he was there. He also exercised regularly. Father McGuire was only 25 years older than me. I say only. When you get to be my age, it's not a long time. So I was 25, he was 50. He might as well have been 100 to me. When you're 25 years old, everybody looks pretty old. And so, but he did exercise 3 times a week. Between tennis and handball he played. So he was a good role model in that. I'm not sure that saying everything in the kindest way possible was one of his great gifts. But he certainly was clear in what he spoke, and clarity is a good thing. And I also remember he taught me a little bit about delegation. I remember I would watch if something was wrong and it's something that he could have possibly easily fixed, but there was somebody else who was supposed to be doing it, he would take the extra time to tell the person whose job it was to do it. It's a good lesson, because if you go take care of it on your own, then you're going to fix it the next time, and the next time, and the next time. So that's I learned that lesson a lot of stages of my life, but I learned it pretty early on from him. The next pastor I was only with Father McGuire 1 year was Father George Z. Griesedek. It says on his tombstone, he's buried there right next to Father Peasold. It says on his tombstone, "Remember me as loving you." That was a very popular song at the time. He was a very gentle man. He also exercised in a different way. he used to say, "I'm going to go bump." What that meant was he was going to his room to do, he would just do some push-ups and some jumping jacks and a few other things. And he was an incredibly friendly man. And so the people loved him. Another priest was the priest who was in charge of Dominic High School in those days. Now, all of our Catholic schools don't even have one priest in them. There we had 4. The priest who was in charge, Father Jim Kamaska, and 3 other of us there, because that was my life was that I would go in the grades, I would have Mass at the parish in the morning, then go to the grade school, then go to the high school in the afternoon, then come home and be a parish priest in the evening and weekends. So he was in charge there. Back in those days in 1975, we had those 4 priests there. We still had 11 nuns there. And I would say, besides being, he treated me incredibly kindly and was glad to have me there, even though I was only there half a day. I also say he was a very wise man, worldly wise. I had nothing to do with administration, but I could just tell that he had a plan, and he did it. He told me that one day, this is 1975, 50 years ago. He said one day, he lived at New Melly and went to Dominic every day. And he said one day New Melly is going to be the Ladue of St. Charles County. Well, if you ever seen some of the McMansions are building over there, he wasn't far off. And where else in the St. Louis area besides Ladue do you know that there's a polo grounds? Well, they got the polo grounds over there too on Benny Road. So, I mean, with the McMansions that are over there and the multi-acre lots, and it doesn't appear it's changing soon, it's far enough away from an interstate. Well, he understood that many years ago. So I think my guess is that same wisdom that he had, he used in running the school as well. Then the sister who was in charge of the school was Sister Margaret, and then her assistant was named Sister Lucy. I would say they did not really understand me, as I was 25 years old, brand new teacher, had no training in it. All I knew is I loved being around kids, and I did my best. Sister Margaret used to come up and ask me when her kids would be using certain songs that I think the songs were appropriate, because she didn't know, and I was close enough to their age that I could still tell. By the time I got in my 30s, I couldn't tell anymore myself. And then Sister Lucy, she had a pretty clear set of standards also, and I still remember one day I was teaching in the classroom, and there was a lot of laughter going on. And the kids were having a good time. I thought I was teaching a good class, but Sister Lucy was teaching in the next room. She came over and peeked her head to see who was causing all that noise. She saw me and she just shook her head. She didn't really say anything, as my teaching style was a little bit different than hers. So I actually, now that I've been an administrator for 1,000 years, I look back and feel sorry for them. I would say they tolerated me. And so they taught me a lesson to be patient when a lessons, talk about musings and lessons. Be patient with young people. Give them a chance to grow. And then, of course, so many of the families in the parish helped me grow as I got close to them. One of them I see here today has had 12 children and is about to turn 100. So give him a round of applause. We're about ready to... Right. His wife, Clarabelle, I remember her very well. I would just say, just picture what it was like coming to this when the kids were mostly still little. They took up 2 pews in church. And she told me, she said, now, Father, they called me Father Ted in those days. She said, Father, don't be upset that I sit there with my eyes closed the whole time. She said, that is the only quiet time I ever have, is the hour at Mass every week. So she was a very kind lady, and so a lot of other people there with whom I had beautiful interactions. One of the maintenance people there was named Frankie Martin. So some of you may have been to Frankie Martin's garden over in Cotterville now. It's kind of an upscale kind of a place for yuppie type people. And it wasn't that in those days. Frankie was a simple country boy, and but he did his job and did his work around the parish. His co-worker, his name is Tim Kelly. You couldn't use this term in this day and age, politically correct days, but he would be known as the town drunk. However, he was very lovable. Everybody loved Tim, and he was one of those guys. On his good days, he did great work. On his bad days, he was kind of a mess. But he was always easy to get along with. But the one reason I mention his name is this. This is on one of Tim's days that was not really good, not really bad, somewhere in between. But for some reason or other, our paths just crossed walking around the parish grounds. And he told me, he said, "Father, there but for the grace of God, you could be like I am." So I don't think I ever did anything to offend him, that he was saying that critically. I think he was just stating a fact. And as you talk about lessons learned is it's a fine line between making it through life and not making it through so well. And a reminder, treat everybody with respect regardless. You don't know, none of us here in church this afternoon knows what anybody else's issues are. So another lesson I learned was whatever was going on in that parish and whatever good I was going to do probably had something to do with what the priest did before I was there, and particularly Father Pizzold established a strong spiritual foundation for that parish, and so those of us who came afterwards were simply trying to build on that. And I could tell even back then the people were trying to help me grow. They were giving me feedback. They were trying to offer me encouragement. I subtitled this section, "The Laity Love the Church." I think, I called it "Newbie Priest, Laity Love Our Catholic Church." Yeah, so this could be another whole series of talks just on that, that I was very active in a teenage retreat movement at the time called Teens Encounter Christ. It really was a lot lay directed. There was peer sharing on it, kind of like teenage retreats are nowadays. But I'm looking back on it, I'm even more amazed. It would have never happened and blossomed the way that it did without the lay leaders taking care of it. Another big spiritual event at the time was called Marriage Encounter. It still exists, but it's not so popular nowadays. I think we had hundreds of families, couples in our parish who participated in that retreat, and they learned lessons. And you don't see many young people doing it, but you'll see some people my age group and older still coming up to communion, holding hands together. That's the way they were taught, because what's the greater sign of unity between people than Jesus Christ himself? And so when we say the two become one, when we say that Jesus is their bond, and that Marriage Encounter community was a very strong movement at the time, which helped reinforce the importance of marriage. That's an emphasis that can be used in every age. Pope St. John Paul II called Marriage Encounter the hope of the church. And so it did a lot of good, and I was happy to be able to be part of that while I was there. Many of the youth who went on the Teens Encounter Christ retreats were people whose parents were part of the Marriage Encounter community. Another thing that was a big deal at the time was a charismatic renewal. Some people called it the charismatic movement. I was also very active in that. I preferred not to call it a movement, because people who did refer to it as a movement, I think they felt kind of elitist and holier than thou, but it certainly was intended to renew the church, to be more aware of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. We do that here in our parish. Many of you might be aware of that. We call them Life in the Spirit seminars. We can always all grow in our ability to be aware of the gifts of the Spirit and use them to serve the church. So the lesson that I would take from that particular era of the church, as laity were beginning to take leadership of so many things, That time while I was there in the late 70s coincided with what we call the decline of the Catholic subculture. What happened during those times, it just all the new seminaries and convents that were built in the 50s and 60s to handle the growing number of vocations that lasted, a period of growth lasted about 10 or 20 years. By the late 70s and into the 80s, it was obvious the trend was going the other direction. So even some of the convents by that time were turned into retreat houses, and even some of the schools were. And so as the number of vocations was declining, both for priesthood and religious, well, then the role of lay leadership became more important than ever. So I believe that the fact that there were these strong lay-led spiritual movements at the time was in part a response of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit always keeps the church going. They called the people who were so loyal to the church at that time the faithful. And so because, and especially priests, we're all mindful of our own weaknesses, failures, sins, imperfections. And so sometimes we say that enough bad things have happened in the church that the Holy Spirit's clearly holding it together. And we say that the people who do remain active in the church, we call the faithful. And we say we don't call them faithful for nothing because they've seen enough of the downside of some things that happen in the church, and yet they remain faithful. So some of the joys of being there were many. For me, this was kind of a hoot being in a quasi-rural setting, even though I had a little bit of that during my deacon year in St. Genevieve. Well, this was a whole new setting for me. I can still remember my folks lived in Jennings. I could make it from, when I got to the parish, I could make it from Cottleville to Jennings in 25 minutes without speeding because there weren't very many cars. By the time I left 4 years later, you could hardly make it from Cottleville to St. Charles in 25 minutes because there were a lot of people and they didn't build up the roads yet. So, I mean, some of the things that I learned how to do out there that a city boy would never learn how to do. Some of the people taught me how to catch fish with your hands. I thought that was always made up, but even I could do it. They showed me how to do that. And I drove on one of the farms. There were still, by that time, there was still a lot of farmland, but mostly gentleman farmers. There were only 5 full-time farmers left in that parish even 50 years ago. And one of them, they let me drive the combine one time during harvest season, beans. And so I remember getting on there. I was slightly nervous, but as most 25 years old, pretty cocky. I thought, this doesn't look that hard, and in fact, it wasn't. All I had to do was keep those big pointy things in front of the combine in the rows and not drive the combine into the creek, and so it worked out. The part that I did not know about combining soybeans in the fall when it's dry, it wasn't in the days, there were not climate-controlled cabins for the driver at that time. You were out in the open air. I still remember when I was on a Saturday afternoon, I stopped in time to get back to church for 4 o'clock confessions and 5 o'clock Mass. I think I went through 3 handkerchiefs at the 5 o'clock Mass. I mean, that soybean dust was in there, it felt like for weeks. And so it was just a little bit of a lesson. And so one of the kids out there taught me too that you can eat an ear of corn without cooking it. I thought that was made up until they actually showed me. Go take a baby ear of corn, peel all the green stuff off of it, and it said it has all the sweetness of the whole ear of corn in it, and it was true. It was like those baby ears of corn, plenty sweet and easy to chew. Back in those days too, working with the youth group there, we didn't have lay youth group leaders at that time. If you had a young priest, it's one of the things the young priest did. So I did. Would take the kids on bike rides, some of them water skiing. Some of them I even took on a float trip all the way from Washington, Missouri, down to St. Charles. I remember asking, I called a Corps of Engineers guy, and I said, sir, I'm thinking about taking some kids from Washington, Missouri to St. Charles on the Missouri River in canoes. I said, would you consider that dangerous? His answer was, any body of water can be dangerous, sir. So I took that to mean just follow the usual guidelines of safety and you'll be all right. So it did turn out okay. I had no idea how fast that Missouri River flowed till we were on it in canoes, but it was an adventure. And bike rides, we would go from Cottleville up to the Mississippi River, the Golden Eagle Ferry, and we would go over where that Mid-Rivers Mall overpass is now. I mean, I don't even like driving on that overpass and that diamond thing they have there. But in those days, all it was a two-lane road. So if you took kids on a bike now on that overpass, you'd probably get called on the hotline. It's dangerous in a car, much less on bicycles. But there were so many fewer people there in those days, we could do that. Then another adventure for me, a joy, I was on the volunteer fire department. There were a lot of young guys on there, and they liked to have fun. It was a big deal. They actually taught me how to drive a truck, and that was a little scary. How little training they gave me, and they said, now you're ready. And I thought, okay, all you needed in those days was a chauffeur's license. And you could get a chauffeur's license just by no driving test. It was a 10-question written test. You could get a chauffeur's license, and that's all you needed to drive that fire truck. So fortunately, I didn't have to do it very often, but one day, the slack time of day for workers was late in the afternoon because the early shift people weren't home from work yet and the late shift people were already gone to work. So one day I had to drive it, and probably about the first 3 or 4 minutes I was pretty scared, but after that I got over that, and I got having fun turning on the siren, and ended up, I forget exactly what the fire was, ended up somewhere up on Highway 79. So, but I made it there. I think somebody else volunteered to drive the truck back. And another one of the fires, I learned that it's impossible to put out a hay fire. We tried and tried and tried, and we were there a long time. I can't tell you how much water we put on the bales of hay, put it out, and sure enough, had to come back the next day and put it out again. It's like impossible to put out. And I also learned there was some fishing lakes out there at the time called Dearman Lakes. There were Monticello East subdivision is nowadays. It's a gated community over there. Most of those lakes are drained, but they were there then. Well, the barn on the property at Dearman Lakes caught on fire. Well, you can imagine there were pigs in there, there was hay in there, and so what it sounded, I mean, it felt like this. There was of course, there wasn't fire hydrants out in the middle of a lake area like that. So we had to suction water out of the lake. The lake was stocked with catfish. So what it felt like was that we were suctioning out catfish out of that lake to shoot up onto that barn, which was full of former pigs, which were now bacon. So it was quite the adventure. Another thing, it was a different era. When they put in new sod for the soccer field, needed to be watered. Well, I don't think they really sought permission, but because most of the guys went to our church, they just went over and used the fire trucks to water the fields. And so somehow they were found out by the St. Charles County Water Department, and some sort of penalty was imposed. I did say that there were some difficult parts about being on the volunteer fire department. Again, I normally was going just for moral support, but every now and again, like I had to drive the truck or help pull hoses or whatever. But one of the saddest things I ever saw was when there was a chimney fire. And there was one that we went to one time. It happened to happen at Christmas, so it was pretty tough to see going into that house and seeing all their Christmas presents and Christmas tree all burned up. And then also they would call me. Well, actually, we had scanners. You just listened for the beep. And in those days, Highway 94 was even more dangerous than it was today. At its widest, it was 4 lanes, and the place where it went down from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, you can imagine now how many lanes is it now? Probably 12 lanes altogether, counting the outer roads on both sides. But just 2 lanes, and where it went down, there was often accidents there. And I still remember pulling up, and here I am, still a young man, late 20s, pulling up on the scene. And usually I was just there to try to help the firefighters from fighting with one another and help them get along, because there was a lot of tension sometimes about what they're supposed to do next or who was in charge. They just said, well, Father, we got 3 dead ones here. And it was sad. It was 3 teenagers. And it became the first of many funerals that I did for teenagers over the years. And it was part of life, so there was that tough aspect to it. Most of the fires were just dumpster fires or somebody setting their car on fire for insurance, but some of them like that were very serious. So all I've talked about so far is the fun stuff and the people there. I did actually do some priest work there. It was my first time being a priest, so did the usual priest things, the baptisms, anointings, weddings. And in those days, it was a change from the way that it had been for the previous 400 years. There was a big emphasis on building community at Mass. So sometimes the sign of peace used to go on and on at Mass. It was an emphasis that had not been there for centuries in the church. There always was community, but it was emphasized at the way Mass was going at that time. And also thinking about on my own life at that time, most of my contemporaries in their late 20s, they were getting married, they were having children, they were establishing their careers. I obviously wasn't getting married and having children, and not even establishing a career. I never looked upon what I did as a career. I never even looked upon it as work. Some people say, oh, Monsignor, you work pretty hard. I said, it's not work if it's your calling. And that's the way I've felt ever since I first started out. And I was asked to spend a lot of time with teens at that time. I spent time with everybody in the parish, but a lot of it was with young people. So I really enjoyed that between the youth group there, Teens Encounter Christ retreats, teaching over at St. Dominic. I taught to the seniors there a course on human sexuality. I think it was called Love, Sex, and Marriage. Well, senior boys think they know just about everything, and especially sex. And so what I used to do to start the class, I used to just make up a simple test. It was just a true-false test, and it was just about knowing basic anatomy and physiology. Well, it was pretty rare that anybody got over 70% on that test, and actually most of the kids got below 50%. I never announced it, but I would write little notes on there. And I wouldn't quite say, how can you be so dumb? But I would say things like, it looks like you're not as smart as you thought you were. And I would never announce any kid's grade in public, but I would announce the sum total of the scores. And I just did that because you can't really teach a course like that without knowing at least the names of the body parts and the way that the body works. And so I think I was able to reach some of them that way. I remember in one class there were 4 couples. They called themselves couples going out, and I was happy with the fact that by the time they finished my class, some of them weren't couples anymore, as I was trying to just teach them what the church teaches. It wasn't called theology of the body at that time, but the theology of the body is really nothing new. It's what the church always taught. The teachings of the church on human sexuality go back to Jesus. So again, this I'd say during my time there, it was beautiful to watch the lay leadership in all these areas: youth work, charismatic renewal, marriage encounter, and what I learned there was love the people, and they will show me how to be a good priest. And that, but I didn't claim to know anything about being a priest when I got ordained. I had some degrees and knew some theology, but I didn't know the practicalities of it. So I just listened to what the people said, and I can't say I did everything anybody said, but if somebody asked me to do something, well, that became a priority. And I learned especially about the importance of visiting the sick. And so I'm very grateful for that to this day. There were some marvelous examples of people living the faith very strongly. So, and then during that time too, I was pretty excited. One of the things I was excited about, I can picture right where I was standing when I heard this news. October 16th, 1978, the Polish Pope was elected. I thought, this is a good thing. Because at that time, those idiotic Polish jokes were a big thing, and there were a lot fewer of them after he got elected. I used to ask people sometimes if they would say one. I would say, well, do you know how to speak Polish yourself? They would say, no. I'd say, well, then you're dumber than a Polish person. So anyway, I was very excited about that. Little did anybody know at the time how long he would be the Pope, for over 25 years, and how he would help transform so much in the church. But given my background, of course, I was especially proud of that. And also a slight analogy. I didn't really set out to do it this way, but you know, one of the reasons those 4 years at Cottleville and teaching at Dominic were so special is the only 4 years of my priesthood I was not administrator of something. It was pretty nice. Not that I don't like being an administrator, but I've been administrator of something for over 40 years. And there's some good things about that, but looking back on it, there were some very freeing years. And just, again, I use this analogy. I can't really compare myself to the Pope, of course, but in terms of lifestyle, if you listen or read his writings, I think a whole lot of what is in his writings came from those first 10 or so years of his priesthood, when he was also teaching teenagers, working with young couples, and I think that it shaped his interactions with those people, shaped what he had to teach later on. It shaped what he taught explicitly with theology of the body. So what's some of the lessons during that time? I learned more about what goes on in homes than I ever wanted to know. Young people, when I was in my 20s, those kids and students at Dominic would tell me anything. And I learned way more about the bad stuff that happens in family life than I ever wanted to know. I learned that not every family was the same in which I grew up. I can still picture some kids in tears and about what was going on in the homes. And to this day, I still remember that. It's when I preach, sometimes I'll say, some of the very best things that people do are in their own home, and some of the worst things they do are in their own home. And so I came out of that. My conclusion was there's no such thing as a perfect family, but the priest's job isn't to help make families be perfect, but to help make them work the best that they can. And so I learned so much. And I learned that my role as a parish priest was to listen to them, help heal when possible, to support them, and keep my eyes and ears open so that I could be sensitive to what I was really hearing and respond to it appropriately. And that same lesson I said before, it was about just love the people and they'll show you how to be a good priest. It became one of my favorite preaching themes to the young priest, because there's a temptation for a young priest just to show people how smart they are and all the theology they know, and frankly, the people don't really care. They care how you treat them. And there's a saying I saw one time, where I saw it of all places in the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles. It said, the people aren't going to care what you know until they know you care. And so I tried to follow that line myself and try to teach it to the seminarians. There was no RCIA in those days yet, and so I met at least once a year, sometimes several times a year. It was a special joy to meet with people one-on-one to help teach them lessons about how to become Catholic. That was teaching people the faith who've never experienced it is easier than getting back a lapsed Catholic. And so people would come and talk to me, and I was in that position to be able to help bring people into the church. Another lesson I learned was pretty simple. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, and you'll be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. Probably one of the most dramatic examples of this is each day I would come home from Dominic somewhere between 3 and 3:30 because I didn't do any extra things at Dominic besides teach. Remember one day I got home, and right around the time I got home, there was a suicide in a family. And I happened to know this, even though I was only there a short time, I knew this family way better than the pastor did. And so he said, why don't you go over there? So I did. So it was an example. I mean, as tragic as that situation was, I got home at the right time and did what I was supposed to do and was able to minister to that family. In fact, to this day, whenever I drive by that house over there, I can still picture that story and how God put me there. The same thing with with helping out with the fire department. If I was doing what I was supposed to do, if it was a day I needed to be there, I could be available to them. One thing is a pretty simple lesson. No matter the size of a parish, the same thing applies here. All a priest can do is get to know the people one person at a time. We have groups, we have organizations, we have a lot of group activities here, but in the end it comes down to getting to know people, letting them know that you care. And I would say something, those of you that are from our parish know that we have the Focus Missionaries here. I'd say that's the motto of the Focus Missionaries. They call it authentic friendship. If you have an authentic friendship with someone, that means a friendship rooted in Jesus Christ and faith, then you can have some very beautiful type interaction. My final statement today is the lay faithful have given me a beautiful amount of support in my priesthood up till this point, the first 49.8 years. And our laity are an example to me very often. I think some people have no idea how much I admire them and their way to live their faith and give me a lot of encouragement. So all I'm trying to do in whatever years God gives me beyond this is to give back half of what I have been given. So thank you for listening to this point, and we'll see, does anybody here want to make any comments? You're welcome to do so. Come up and get a microphone. Try this microphone again, we'll see. Tell which one? The flea story? Yeah, okay. This is one Good Friday, and I'm in here in confessions. And the echo seems less now, doesn't it, or not? The echo's just as bad? Okay, I'll go back over here then. I thought you said the echo was just as bad as it was before. It went away for some reason. Okay, so the flea story is, I was in a confessional over at Cotterville on some random Good Friday hearing confessions, and there was a break or something in between confessions, I forget why, between the times we had it scheduled. And I go out in the parking lot, and of all things, I mean, it wasn't literally like a totally rural area anymore, but it was rural enough that there was some girl riding a horse down the street. And she was just without a saddle or anything. She was just riding. And so I'm outside just talking to this girl, and there were a few other kids around. And she said, well, do you want to try riding this horse? I didn't know a thing about riding horses. But I did get on the horse. And we didn't really go very far, but it was just like, it seemed like kind of a fun thing to try, so I did. And then I went back in the confessional. But when I got back in the confessional, I learned a lesson about horses when my calves started itching. And then they were itching more and more and more. And I realized I didn't really know this, that horses had fleas. So not only do the horses have fleas, but so does anybody who sits on a horse without a saddle. And so I remember, I thought, Lord, this is a heck of a way to spend Good Friday. So all I remember was, I did stay in the confessional. I did my duty. I thought we all suffer for Jesus. But boy, as soon as my term was over in that confessional, I hightailed it back to the rectory. I think I threw away those pants because they weren't going to be, they were no chance. But yeah, that's the flea story. So somebody else wanted to tell a story? Yeah, you can do that. I have no idea how to turn that on.
I don't know. I'm good. So, Msgr, we just were so happy when he came. He was young and he was fun. And the youth group, some of those guys are over there, and okay, thanks. We went to the Teens Encounter Christ, like he said, and it was Gateway 3, which was a very early one. And I was 14 at the time, and you're supposed to be 15. And he said, it's okay, you can go. So I was very happy. I know my brother-in-law Richard was on that one, and Dan Lacey, Mr. Lacey, one of his sons. Joe, were you on that? Not Gateway 3? So anyway, that's when we got to know each other, and I was 14. So Msgr has officiated at my wedding, our wedding with my husband, and has, well, yeah, of course your wedding with your husband. And my kiddos, he has been the officiant at their baptism and at my dad's funeral. So we've had a lot of fun over the years, but when we were young, still in high school, I think, he would come out to Weldon Spring Heights. That's where we lived, and Mr. Lacey and Joe lived out there. And so we would have a huge 4th of July celebration, and he still comes out there. So that was a long time ago. But he would come out, you know, right at dinner time. That, you know, but dinner time for him was earlier. So we learned very early on that to have the food ready sooner because Msgr was coming to eat. And what he was coming to eat was my dad's pork steaks. He loved them, and when my dad passed away, my husband Brett took over the pork steaks and used Dad's recipe, so he still comes. But in the early days, he really had bad cars. They were sad cars. Some of them didn't run. So he would pull in, and when it was time to leave, we would all follow him out to the trunk. And he would pop the trunk, and we would all take a empty gallon jug of milk, and we'd proceed back into the house, and we would fill it with water to put in the radiator so that he could make it back to Cottleville. And so I do remember that. It was a lot of fun. And another thing I remember was that you climbed up a pole to get a sign. Was that in
That's
Poland?
a rumor.
It was not a rumor. It was not a rumor, was it? No. So and then
I put up that sign here every year. But it's a rumor. All I know is when I got home from Poland, that banner was in my suitcase.
Yes, isn't that something?
I'm not quite sure how it got there.
Was it Father George at that time? Because I couldn't imagine hanging. So anyway, he hung that sign at the back of church, and we thought that was very cool. But the great thing about Father Ted, as we called him, he listened to us. He listened to us, and he was fun, and he liked us. He really liked us. So it made me change my whole thought about faith and going to church and about being a Catholic. So we thank you.
Good job, Robin. Thank you. This gentleman, I might be turning off the microphone at some point. We'll see.
Well, I would just follow up a fellow techite with Robin on that. I was also 14 when Father Ted was trying to start this retreat weekend, and how desperate he must have been to reach out to people like me to go on this Catholic retreat. It was a life changer. I appreciate your effort there. After that weekend, you were also heavily involved in the youth group at St. Joe's, and it was pretty active.
It was very active.
I was never really part of that inner circle. I did go with a friend of mine to this. It would have been after the tech weekend, and we were not of a right mind, my friend and I, when we went. and Father Ted, in his wisdom, suggested that if we were going to come like that, we shouldn't come. I don't know if your memory's exactly that way, but so anyway, I missed out on youth group for the next several years. But I believe he must have continued to pray for me and for others in that. He taught at St. Dominic. I say he taught me. I'm not sure I learned, but that's on me. You were well liked, appreciated, respected. I consider you a friend and a family priest. The other thing I think he did learn during our early relationship is how far he could hit a 7-iron. We played golf one time, and I thought he'd been playing a while, but told him he was about 150 yards out. Pulls out a club and he sails the green about 40 yards. So I think he learned how far he could hit a 7-iron that day. His story may be, his memory may be a little bit different, but appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ben.
Thank you. Good. I'm not going to comment on the golf story. Golf stories do not have to be true to be told. But the one about the youth group dance, we used to have dances in those days. And while I was kind to the kids and we got along fine, it wasn't exactly like anything goes. All I can tell you is at one of those dances, we collected enough adult beverages to stock the rectory for 2 years. So it was a special challenge there because the windows were low and the kids could actually hand stuff in right through the windows. But me not being that far removed from being a teenager, we caught on to some of those things. So who else wanted to say something? What? Well, yeah, that wasn't really during my Cottleville years, so you got to come back to hear that story. I forget how many, that'll be 2 chapters from now, I think. Yes, that'll be, the next chapter is going to be when I went to San Francisco to get my doctorate, and then the next chapter after that will be the years that I worked in high schools, and that was from, well, besides Dominic, but that was from 1983 to 1990. So that's the next chapter. That's when I was at 3 different schools, Rosary, Kennedy, and Borgia. And then, so it won't even be in that chapter. It'll be in the next one. When I was on Cardinal Regali's staff, because he's the one that asked me to do it. So, yeah, come back. It's sounds like it's 3 sessions from now. That was in 1999. Anybody else? Any other fact checkers? Yes. Mary Claire, yes. What's that? Oh, it's Teresa. Excuse me. I wasn't looking close enough. Go ahead. Well, the different answers to different things. For eating, we did have somebody there who made an evening meal for us, I think 5 days a week. And we had somebody who cleaned the house. But the eating story, I would say a lot of meals were just catch as you catch can. What I remember was the drive back from Dominic to Cottleville. Sometimes I like the KFC once a week. They would have fried chicken livers. And I would get a pint of those, and they would be gone by the time I got back to Cottleville. So kind of a variety of ways. The clothes I always did on my own. Clothes are so simple I can even do them. So we'll have that was never much of a problem. Anything else, Teresa? No? No? Okay, good. Anybody else have anything you want to say? All right, good. So we will retire to the gathering space, and the next one is next Sunday, and that'll be about my years in San Francisco. And I may not have any fact checkers here because no people I was in school with there are from all over the world, and nobody I was in school with there. I did learn. I think I call that one doctoral program Catholics Here Comes Everyone, because I learned a lot practically about just the Catholic Church around the world from living there and getting involved in the church there. So if I find a fact checker from those years, there will be some people who I can bring in as fact checkers who can let you know if I actually learned anything out there, because those are people that I taught. I taught in a master's program at SLU for over 20 years, maybe 25 years. So most of those people that I taught who are getting master's degrees in being a principal, most of them are retired. So in fact, I think all of them are. I think the last one retired last year. So they could possibly verify or not verify that I actually learned something out there. All right, thanks. I'm glad you all came. Thank you. I hope you have a good time. I have a good time talking. I hope you had a good time listening. And if you come back, there will be more. This is number 3, so 5 more to go. Next one is next Sunday, same time. The rest of them after that are all going to be weekday nights. So we purposely designed different nights for different people, so in case somebody couldn't make certain nights. All right, I'll be back there if anybody wants to visit for a little bit. Oh. Sure. Sure, that's fine. We can do it right here. Sure. Actually, why don't we go back to the gathering space? That way, nobody needs to feel compelled to stay in here if they don't want to.